Thanksgiving, a time for love, family, and gratitude. But for the Guy family, Thanksgiving 2016 became a day of unspeakable horror. What should have been a time of celebration turned into a nightmare of betrayal, greed, and unimaginable violence. This is the story of Joel Michael Guy Jr., a son who murdered his parents in a crime so heinous it shocked even seasoned investigators. The Guy family seemed like any other. Joel Guy Sr., 61, and Lisa Guy, 55, were hardworking, loving parents. They lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and were preparing to retire and enjoy their golden years. Joel had recently left his job as a pipeline engineer, and Lisa was finishing up her work at a local human resources office. Together, they planned to sell their home and move back to Kingsport, Tennessee, where they could settle down and be closer to extended family. The couple had 4 children, all adults, and they were proud of the family they had built. But their youngest, 28-year-old Joel Michael Guy Jr., was unique. Joel Jr. had spent much of his adult life in college, but he had no degree to show for it. He didn't have a job and relied entirely on his parents for financial support. Despite their love for their son, Joel Sr. and Lisa had decided it was time for him to become independent. What the Guys didn't know, or perhaps couldn't fully comprehend, was the depth of Joel Jr.'s dependency. For years, he had grown accustomed to a life funded entirely by his parents. He had no real plans for a career or a future of his own. When Joel Sr. and Lisa decided to cut him off financially, it set the stage for a crime that would horrify the nation. Thanksgiving weekend in 2016 was meant to be a happy occasion. Joel Jr. returned to Knoxville to spend the holiday with his parents. His sisters and their families were also there, making it a full house. The family enjoyed Thanksgiving dinner together, sharing food, laughter, and conversations about their plans for the future. But for Joel Jr., this wasn't a typical Thanksgiving. Beneath his calm demeanor, he had already begun planning something sinister. His parents' decision to end his financial support had left him seething with anger and desperation. He saw only one way out: to kill them and claim their life insurance money. On Saturday, November 26, 2 days after Thanksgiving, Joel Sr. and Lisa were busy packing up their home. They planned to finalize their move to Kingsport in the coming weeks. But they would never make it. At some point during the day, Joel Jr. launched his brutal attack. His first victim was his father. Using a knife, he stabbed Joel Sr. at least 42 times in a frenzied assault. The wounds were so severe that some of Joel Sr.'s ribs were completely severed. He fought back, leaving injuries on Joel Jr., but the younger man's rage was unstoppable. Joel Sr. eventually succumbed to his wounds. When Lisa returned home from a shopping trip later that afternoon, she was ambushed. Joel Jr. stabbed her at least 31 times in an equally vicious attack. The wounds punctured her liver and kidneys, leaving her with no chance of survival. But the horror didn't end with their murders. Joel Jr. meticulously began dismembering his parents' bodies. Using knives and a saw, he separated their limbs and torsos, attempting to dispose of the remains. He placed the body parts into large plastic containers filled with an acid-based solution, hoping to dissolve them completely. In the kitchen, police would later discover a pot on the stove containing Lisa's severed head, boiling in chemicals. It was a gruesome scene that investigators would never forget. Joel Jr. had planned to leave no trace of his crimes, but his plan was far from complete. As night fell, Joel Jr. began cleaning up the crime scene. He had purchased cleaning supplies earlier in the week and used them to scrub away blood and other evidence. But his efforts were sloppy. Bloodstains and DNA evidence were left behind, and the smell of chemicals filled the house. On Monday, November 28, Lisa's co-workers became worried when she failed to show up for work. Lisa was known for her punctuality, and her absence was highly unusual. Concerned, her employer contacted the police and requested a welfare check at the Guy residence. When officers arrived at the home, they found it eerily quiet. The doors were locked, and the house appeared undisturbed from the outside. But as they stepped inside, they were hit with the overwhelming smell of chemicals. The scene that awaited them was beyond anything they could have imagined. The dismembered remains of Joel Sr. and Lisa were found scattered throughout the house. The containers filled with acid and the pot on the stove revealed Joel Jr.'s grisly attempts to dispose of the bodies. Investigators also discovered tools and chemicals used in the crime, along with a detailed notebook outlining Joel Jr.'s plan. The notebook was chilling. It contained step-by-step instructions for committing the murders, dismembering the bodies, and disposing of the evidence. Joel Jr. had even calculated how much time each step would take. The level of premeditation was staggering. Joel Jr. himself had fled the scene after injuring himself during the attacks. He drove back to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to seek medical attention for cuts on his hands. But his injuries, and his plan, didn't go unnoticed. Police quickly identified Joel Jr. as the prime suspect. The evidence against him was overwhelming, from the DNA found at the crime scene to the notebook detailing his intentions. He was arrested on November 29, 2016, at his Baton Rouge apartment. Joel Jr.'s trial began in October 2020, nearly 4 years after the murders. Prosecutors described the killings as premeditated and fueled by greed. They emphasized his motive: to collect his parents' $500,000 life insurance policy. The defense attempted to argue Joel Jr.'s lack of mental stability, but the evidence left little room for doubt. Jurors saw graphic photos of the crime scene and heard testimony about the meticulous planning in Joel Jr.'s notebook. After deliberating for just 3 hours, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all charges. Joel Michael Guy Jr. was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Thanksgiving murders of Joel Sr. and Lisa Guy devastated their family and community. They were remembered as kind, loving parents who had dedicated their lives to their children. Their deaths were senseless, driven by greed and entitlement. Today, the Guy home stands empty, a haunting reminder of a family torn apart by betrayal. And Joel Michael Guy Jr. will spend the rest of his life in prison, paying the price for his unspeakable actions. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Deep Truth. If you found this story compelling, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories. And as always, stay safe,